Okay, everyone, so to pick up where we left off, we have successfully downloaded a web page from the interwebs using a script, which was actually really straightforward and, kind of highlights how sort of general and reusable code like this can be, right? Because we opened a file that we wanted to write HTML data to exactly the same way that we would open a file that we would want to write a CSV to. But now we need to actually extract data from this. And in order to do that, we are going to use a library called BeautifulSoup, which hopefully you have successfully installed, and you'll find out right now. Sorry, actually this uses a slightly different import statement, and I don't know why. I think it's just how this person has decided to organize their code. So if you see I'm back at the top here, and I am telling it to import this BeautifulSoup package, and hopefully everything will work okay. And in fact, I am going to print a hi there right up here just to make sure it doesn't give me any issues. So these are not very good comments. Sorry, print statements. Uh-oh. Okay, so now it looks like there is some trouble. So I'm going to go debug my own install of BeautifulSoup and see what I can get sorted from that. And I will be back. Okay, so that proved to be easy enough. If you guys have trouble with the pip version, what I was able to get working was actually this command called sudo easy install BeautifulSoup 4. So it's a slightly older than pip, but just so you guys know this sudo command, here, let me actually close this out so it's a bit easier to see. So just so you understand this sudo command, sudo basically means install something on this computer as an administrator, and that's just what it is. And so when you put enter on something like this, it will very often, because I already installed this, it's not showing it here, but it'll just ask for your password. So if you get a prompt for your password, go ahead and use your administrator password for your computer. However, now I have BeautifulSoup 4 installed, so everything looks good, and you can see I got my hi there 1, hi there 2, confirming that it is in fact installed. I'm going to start using this right away. So I'm going to create a variable called phsoup, calling the variable that the BeautifulSoup data goes into, giving it some version of soup is just a convention, so no need to worry too much about it. So to do this, I'm going to use, the command is actually called BeautifulSoup. And so just to give you a little bit of, and then I'm also going to nest an open command in here and give it my file name. I don't know if PH should be capitalized or not. I guess I will not capitalize it, just for consistency. So BeautifulSoup, basically what it does is it helps us pull things out of web pages. So I'll share with you guys the link to the documentation, but the thing to know is basically that it helps us. So if we look at our HTML file, right, this is the raw text of our HTML file, as in looking at it as a text file, not this view, which is when it's interpreted by a browser. If we go, there's a lot of junk in here that we don't need, right? What we need is somewhere down in here. And right, so we can see all of this stuff, this table is actually the stuff that we need, right, is actually our data that's interesting to us. And so the question of how do we get at that, right, copying this as a text file and then sort of trying to extract information from it would be a nightmare. And so BeautifulSoup does this for us, which is why we love it. And basically, once you've done this quote beautiful souping of your data file, of your HTML file, you can access parts of the web page really nicely by just telling it that you want to find every table on the page, or every anchor tag on the page, or every div tag on the page. So it just massively simplifies this for us. So I am going to, so what I'm looking for is I'm going to look for table tags, and I'm going to look for a specific table tag. And where do I get the criteria for determining what I look for? I need to inspect my web page. So I'm going to create a variable called data table, and I'm going to use my phsoup, and there's something called the find method with BeautifulSoup. And so I'm going to say, look, I want to find a table. But I don't want to find any table, just any table, because if I do a quick search on this view source, I can see that there are lots of tables. Well, that's vegetables, right? But there are lots of HTML tables on this page. So this is where being in Chrome helps us, because I'm going to go ahead and right click and say inspect element. So what this is going to do is see if I can help me figure out if there's something unique about the table that within this page that I want, that I can use to kind of zero in on it well. And so if I sort of, as I mouse over various elements, I'm getting bits of this, and I see here's a table, peach of various foods. I don't know what that, right? So that's a table. That's 590 wide, and that's 575. Right, okay, so that's one big table. So I'm just going to kind of go through here and see if I can't find, aha. So now I see here that I have a, that I have one table, and, okay, that's its width. Okay, so that's another table. This can get very, very nested. Ah, okay, so this looks like my main data table, right? So there's no other way to do this except this way, right? I just have to look at it. But this looks like a pretty good bet for a couple of reasons as the table that I want to look for. One, because it seems to contain just the data that I'm after, which is handy, right? I don't think, you know, I can dig in here and see if there's another table, but no, we get right into the data rows. So this looks like the table that I really want to be targeting because it just has my data in it. Also, what's handy is that it has some additional parameters here, some attributes, right? So remember our key value pairs, cell spacing equals 1, cell padding equals 5. So those are ways of formatting tables via HTML. The other thing that's nice is that it has a specific width set on it, and what that means is we can actually use these parameters to say, listen, BeautifulSoup, I want you to give me a table, but I only want you to give me a table that has width 500. And so BeautifulSoup has a really straightforward way of doing that, which is that we can actually just, in our code, say, oh, and by the way, when you find a table, go ahead and find me the table where width equals 500, right? And if, you know, if this works as we expect, we should get just that data table. So I'm going to go ahead and add, I'm going to get rid of these print statements. I'm going to print out, right? We always use our print statements to kind of keep track of what's going on here. So I'm just going to print out the data table and see if it seems to be what I want. Okay, so we go to the top here, and yeah, this looks pretty good. Kind of food, pH range approximate, kind of food. Okay, so this is awesome because we've now carved off all that extra HTML. We're just looking at our data table. And now all we have to do is convert this, into something that is a sensible format. Now I just want to point out to you guys that we see here in our data, what do we see here? We see a comma, right? We know about commas. So one of the things that we're going to do is, rather than creating this as a CSV, we're going to create it as a TSV, right? A tab separated value file. And the reason why we do that, I mean, that's just kind of like an easy way to deal with the fact that if we have commas in our content, we maybe don't want to use them as a separator. There's other ways to deal with it, but since TSV and CSV are pretty much equally portable and, you know, equally easy to open in spreadsheet software, no reason to not just go for it, right? So here we are. So we're just going to get going. I can do, now again, we're basically looking at rows and columns of data, right? Happens to be in an HTML table, but we don't mind. So we're going to reuse a lot of the same stuff that we used last time. So we're going to say, okay, well, first we need to get the rows. We want to break it into rows. And in a data table, or rather in an HTML table, you can see that each row is a TR tag. Okay, so we're just going to say to BeautifulSoup, thanks for that handy thing. I want to create data rows, and I'm going to use my data table. I'm going to say data table find all, right? So find actually only looks for one thing. Find all will look for all the things. Okay, find every row in that data table. And now I'm going to start, I need to loop through all the rows. So we're back to where we were. You know, we're back in the same process that we looked at last week. So I'm going to go, okay, for row num, row, right? I want to, keep track of this. So, as you guys go through this process, take a look back at your other file. In fact, why don't I open it right now? Oops, I lost it. But, go ahead and look back and realize that, what we're doing is we're dealing with rows and columns. So we're going to do it in just the same way that we did before. Except now my variable is called data rows. And again, just to make sure that things are, going as we expect, I can print row num row, right? And see what that does. So one thing that I will say is like maybe not ideal in this, in fact I could probably afford to comment out, is that because I'm running this script every time, I'm actually re-downloading this HTML page, which I don't really need to do, right? I only need to do it once in order for, oh, haha, I didn't print anything. In order for this to work. So I'm going to run this way one more time. What I actually will probably do is comment out, it would be better to sort of comment out this top part, or to put this in a separate file, right? I could just run this once, this scraper part. I could run it once and then do the parsing in a separate file. Would probably be a bit more efficient. But it's also nice to know that you can kind of have it all in one place, because then you can pass this file around and anybody else can run this script and get exactly the same result that you did, right? So that kind of loops back to some of our themes about reproducibility and transparency and accountability, right? If you hand someone this Python script and they can run Python and BeautifulSoup, then they can get the same thing that you have. And there's something really powerful about that. So we know what we're doing here. We now need to get each individual thing, but instead of, for example, instead of having like a big string that was separated where the data columns were separated by commas, we actually have these TD tags, right? So every cell in that HTML table is a TD tag. So again, I'm going to rely on my soup here, and I'm just going to say, okay, well, my row cells are going to be comprised of all find all of the TD tags in that row, right? Now, the other thing that I want to watch out for here is variability in my data, right? There are two things that are going to cause problems when you're trying to script things, and one is going to be sort of like weird characters, but basically inconsistent data is kind of the challenge of programming, right? If we just had beautiful data that was always, the same number of columns and the same number of rows, and there was never any formatting vagaries, then our lives would be much easier. But real world data comes with real world problems, and since things like this HTML table were originally designed with the idea that humans would read them, not that computers would download them, you see things, for example, like this, right? So this is going to trip us up unless we create a special case for it. We need to make sure that when we're looking at these rows, and it's worth pointing out here that the rows work across, right? So we're actually going apples, corn, whole corn, corn on the cob. And so what we want to note is that some of our rows, milk here, right, only have, don't have 4 columns, they only have 3. So we're going to need to keep our eye on that and probably create a case for it at some point. But for now, I'm just going to go through and do my basic, my basic row creation. So I'm going to say, okay, for cell num cell, right? So again, I've got an individual row, right, which is my row cells. Now I'm going to go through each column in that row. So for cell num cell, and enumerate row cells. Right? Let's print the cell. Right? So this won't look very different from the print statement that we have. We'll just get each cell on an individual line. But let's see how we do. We think we get everything. All right. Looks good. So the thing is, we still have a lot of junk happening here. So when we come back, we will look at how to remove the junk and sort of wrap this up into a tab-separated value file and deal with those columns that only have 3, or those rows that only have 3 columns instead of 4. All right, see you in a minute.